pertaining a genius, and so just a judgment by the instructions of 2 or 3 tutors at least, who with all their ignorance and insufficiency, but if you labor under any doubt or mistake, not sufficient that instructors be competently skilled. Chapter 6 of Improvement of the Mind. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Improvement of the Mind by Isaac Watts and Stephen Norris Fellows. Chapter 6 of Living Instructions and Lectures of Teachers and Learners. Firstly, there are few persons of so pertaining a genius and so just a judgment as to be capable of learning the arts and sciences without the assistance of teachers. There is scarce any science so safely and so speedily learnt even by the noblest genius and the best books without a tutor. His assistance is absolutely necessary for most persons, and it is very useful for all beginners. Books are a sort of dumb teachers. They point out the way of learning, but if you labor under any doubt or mistake, they cannot answer sudden questions or explain present doubts and difficulties. This is properly the work of a living instructor. Secondly, there are very few tutors who are sufficiently furnished with such universal learning as to sustain all the parts and provinces of instruction. The sciences are numerous and many of them lie far wide of each other, and it is best to enjoy the instructions of 2 or 3 tutors at least. In order to run through the whole encyclopedia or circle of sciences where it may be obtained, then we may expect that each will teach the few parts of learning which are committed to his care in greater perfection. But where this advantage cannot be had with convenience, one great man must supply the place of 2 or 3 common instructors. Thirdly, it is not sufficient that instructors be competently skillful in those sciences which they profess and teach, but they should have skill also in the art or method of teaching and patience in the practice of it. It is a great unhappiness indeed when persons, by a spirit of party or faction or interest or by purchase, are set up for tutors who have neither due knowledge of science nor skill in the way of communication. And alas, there are others who with all their ignorance and insufficiency have self-admiration and effrontery enough to set up themselves, and the poor pupils fare accordingly and grow lean in their understandings. And let it be observed also, there are some very learned men who know much themselves but have not the talent of communicating their own knowledge, or else they are lazy and will take no pains at it. Either they have an obscure and perplexed way of talking, or they show their learning uselessly and make a long periphrasis of every word of the book they explain, or they cannot condescend to young beginners, or they run presently into the elevated parts of the science because it gives themselves greater pleasure, or they are soon angry and impatient and cannot bear with a few impertinent questions of a young inquisitive and sprightly genius, or else they skim over a science in a very slight and superficial survey and never lead their disciples into the depths of it. Fourthly, a good tutor should have characters and qualifications very different from all these. He is such a one as both can and will apply himself with diligence and concern and indefatigable patience to effect what he undertakes, to teach his disciples and see that they learn, to adapt his way and method as near as may be to the various dispositions as well as to the capacities of those whom he instructs, and to inquire often into their progress and improvement. And he should take particular care of his own temper and conduct, that there be nothing in him or about him which may be of ill example, nothing that may savour a haughty temper or a mean and sordid spirit, nothing that may expose him to the aversion or to the contempt of his scholars, or create a prejudice in their minds against him and his instructions. But, if possible, he should have so much of a natural candour and sweetness mixed with all the improvements of learning, as might convey knowledge into the minds of his disciples with a sort of gentle insinuation and sovereign delight, and may tempt them into the highest improvements of the reason by a resistless and insensible force. But I shall have occasion to say more on this subject when I come to speak more directly of the methods of the communication of knowledge. Fifthly, the learner should attend with constancy and care on all the instructions of his tutor, and if he happens to be at any time unavoidably hindered, he must endeavour to retrieve the loss by double industry for time to come. He should always recollect and review his lectures, read over some other author or authors upon the same subject, confer upon it with his instructor or with his associates, and write down the clearest result of his present thought, reasonings and inquiries, which he may have recourse to hereafter, either to re-examine them and apply them to proper use, or to improve them further to his own advantage. Sixthly, a student should never satisfy himself with bare attendance on the lectures of his tutor unless he clearly takes up his sense and meaning and understands the things which he teaches. A young disciple should behave himself so well as to gain the affection and ear of his instructor,